My name's Tim Siglin. I'm a contributing editor with Streaming Media Magazine, and I'm also the media strategy principal at a company called ReelSolver Incorporated. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's actually fairly well debated in the industry, but we're going to parse it down into a couple things. What we're going to talk about is live storytelling with virtual reality and 360-degree video. And so we're not going to be talking necessarily about on-demand content. We're going to be talking about the live streaming capability for VR and 360. One of our panelists, Mark from Likeminded Entertainment, is not able to be with us, but we'll start at the far end of the table, and I'll ask you guys just to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your company, and then also tell us what you sort of see as the difference between virtual reality video and 360 video when it comes to live storytelling. So Mark?
Yes, my name is Mark Alamares. I'm CEO of Mobeon. Mobeon is an advanced media company. We're currently involved in streaming production, but we're also providing services and consulting services in regards to advanced technology in various fields such as VR, as well as other type of video game oriented technologies, and especially relating to VR.
My name is Devon Copley. I'm the head of product for Ozo at the Ozo platform at Nokia, or at least I was until 2 weeks ago. But that's another story.
Yeah, we'll talk about that briefly.
Yeah, our team created the Ozo Live software, which is sort of generally acknowledged to be the premium solution for live VR 360. Our software, and to some degree, teams using our software and our hardware, have done the largest live productions for VR around the world. Things like the Champions League final for UEFA, which had 16 Ozo cameras. The recent Coldplay show in Chicago, which had 19 Ozo cameras. What's the one you just rented 17 for? Yeah, that was cool. No, that was Austin City Limits just 2 weeks ago. So the biggest productions use our software. We've been in the trenches with them, so we've had a lot of experience with this stuff.
Hi, I'm Michael Mansouri. I'm co-founder of Radiant Images, and thank you for coming to our panel. We are solution providers in all the realities: base, augmented, and virtual reality. We're technology agnostic. We're solution based. And we provide technology to production companies, and we become a technology partner to all production companies around the world that want to really, really experiment in all the mixed mediums. Some of the biggest projects we've done was actually with Nokia. Some of the most groundbreaking high visual as well as high viewership has been actually broken in 360. We just did a piece with CNN where we collaborated for the solar eclipse. And for people that say that there's not enough viewership in 360, we had 5.8 million viewers in 360 alone, and 2D had 2.8. So we're actually getting a lot more engagement because we're figuring out new methods and much more interactive ways for people to experience 360 than traditional 2D.
So let me follow up on that. We're talking about storytelling. What is different about watching an eclipse in a 360 video where you can see the sky and you can see behind you versus just in a standard 16:9 shot?
Yeah, so the language completely changes. So let's think about it like a bee that's flying over your face, and you have a headset on, right? And you're completely immersed, and you have no other reference other than the bee that's in front of you. Now imagine that bee on your monitor or on your handheld devices further away. That's going to feel like a small little dot. So the language, first of all, changes. So that's part of what we do with our content creators. We try to understand what is it they're trying to convey, and where is the viewerships. I mean, right now, frankly, the viewerships are mostly in 360. And not in virtual reality.
Okay. And you sort of describe an in-your-face storytelling where you say the bee is right in front of you. That was one of the big sort of shock values of 3D movies. Is that pretty much what we see 360 and VR for is shock value, or is there benefit of doing sort of wider landscapes and that type of thing as well?
I think when new technology comes out, everyone experiments, and they go to the first thing that they're familiar with, and they want to poke. And in that process, we figure out language, we figure out tone, and we start putting self-constraint. We don't try to entertain people by shock. We try to do it with much subtle approaches. So that's I think what we've seen lately with content creators. They're not using it as gimmicks. They're trying to figure out what is this language? How do you tell compelling stories? How do you tell stories that are deeper, more engaging than traditional 2D? Because this actually does have the power of becoming extremely engaging.
Okay, interesting. So, technology question. When we look at sort of streaming in general, 4K streaming is here in fits and starts, certainly for on-demand, maybe not necessarily as much for live. We've got 1080p HDR, a number of the online video platforms saying that's sort of the sweet spot for their customers as opposed to 4K. If the industry is working at 1080p averages, and we've solved the technical challenges there, some people that I've talked to have said the technical challenges are too insurmountable for virtual reality in 360 at resolutions, even at 1080p. What's the panel's sort of response to that? And from a technology standpoint, Nokia.
Sure. Well, they're certainly not insurmountable. There are major challenges, though, at every point of the pipeline, from capture to post-production or live production, the switching and such, to delivery, which is what you started with, to rendering. But the good news is I think there are solutions on the way, especially for the back half. I think, because streaming is used for both on-demand and live content,
certainly.
There's been sort of a bigger push towards solving that sort of the end part of the pipeline.
And that's typical in every technology advancement that we make in terms of resolutions, 4K, 1080p, et cetera.
So there's a technique that's, it doesn't have a standard name at the moment. I call it Viewport adaptive streaming. It's known by other names, field of view streaming, but someday we'll converge on an actual name for it. But the idea is quite simple, that you don't need to send the full 360 when all you're looking at is a portion of it, right? And so this is becoming a reality. We actually did the very first, that I know of, public live stream using Viewport adaptive technology at the Oculus Connect conference 3 weeks ago, whatever that was. And Wowza just yesterday, in their most recent release, supports it in their production branch. Now, they haven't actually told anybody that yet, but it will be mentioned soon enough. So I think when you use Wowza server with the Ozo player, you can do Viewport adaptive streaming now, and what that means is both a reduction in bandwidth by 40% or so versus a standard stream, and a reduction, and this a lot of people don't recognize this, but a reduction in the processing requirements on the client.
Right.
So what this means is you can do 6K even though you have a 4K decoder, because you're not decoding the whole frame, you're only decoding parts of it, right? So that part of the production chain, I think it's going to get solved quicker than people think, and there is room for improved sort of perceptual experience even on the current generation of headsets. A 4K frame delivers about 12.4 pixels per degree. The Rift is capable of maybe 15, and that difference is significant, right? So we will see that happening just even in 2018. Now the bigger problem is on the production side. We have cameras now that can capture 6K or 8K even. But how do you get that through a broadcast production?
Right.
We have no tools. SDI fails, so you got to go to IP. But as far as I know, there is no IP switcher that switches 6K, much less 6K stereo, much less 8K
and even
stereo.
production switchers that switch 4K, it's the backplane essentially is 4K. It's not
That's right.
12K or
That's right.
16K.
And we had to hack the Blackmagic switcher to do 4K 3D, true dual 4K. Like we had to write our own macros and stuff.
I mean, they actually removed 3D support. They're capable of it, but because 3D died for TV, they don't even support it in 4K, even though the hardware is capable.
So one quick clarifying question before Mark adds his comment, because I know Mark wants to add a comment. But when you talk about the field of view perspective, you mentioned reduced bandwidth and the ability to reduce the processing. Is it also increasing the quality in the field of view relative? Because before, one of the problems was when you sent everything, you had to reduce to sort of the lowest common denominator across the board.
Yeah, everything's relative, right? I mean, at a given bandwidth, which is typically the situation you're in, whether it's your uplink bandwidth or your downlink bandwidth, what's the maximum quality you can get with that bandwidth? So it gives benefits all the way down. You can do a 4K mono equivalent stream at about 6 megabits a second,
right,
which means you can reach more people. That translates into reach. More quality for more people, and so that's going to make a big difference.
And I guess what I'm asking is, given video optimization where people will reduce bandwidth for equivalent quality, it seems like the target is always reduced bandwidth. But if VR to begin with is sort of a lower resolution than standard, are we doing a little bit of give and take there where we reduce the bandwidth somewhat, but we increase the quality as well of what's in the field of view? Is that a practicality, or is everybody's looking to reduce bandwidth?
That winds up being different for different productions. Depending on what your goals are, what your target is, and what your budget is. I think you can optimize for different things. You can optimize for quality. You can optimize for bandwidth savings. You can optimize for reach. I mean, and that can vary from one production to the next.
Okay.
And what I'd like to say is, as new codecs become much more adopted, such as HEVC, I feel that there eventually we'll get to a point where that will no longer be an issue, but it's just a matter of time before we see the higher resolution becoming much more standard for VR streaming as well. And also, again, with increasing in the qualities of some of the optics of the head-mounted displays, where they're able to use light field technology to be able to render scenes in real time, where it gives you it could actually track, does eye tracking and see your field of view and adjust according to what you're actually viewing. All that will be tied together into, I guess, a much better workflow down the road. But again, we're still at that point where everything is being worked out. But there's a lot of companies that are doing things to optimize the whole experience. And as you had mentioned, especially Nokia was there to kind of make the workflow from end to end a lot easier and smoother. So as that happens, I think we'll be in a better place shortly. But again, it's still a little bit of rough waters, but it's getting easier.
And I would think for the processing for decoding and encoding HEVC, you really would want to go to something constrained like field of view, because you're going to have to use a lot more processing power to begin with to get to those resolutions. Along the terms of codecs, are the next generation of codecs, AV1, HEVC, aware in any way that they're being used for 360 video? Or are they sort of dumb like AVC was and just, the stitching happens outside of the actual compression?
Yeah, we're participating at Nokia in the standards process at MPEG around what they call Omnidirectional media format, OMAF.
Okay.
So this is a new format that is en route from MPEG. It is more of a package specification than it is a codec per se, but it will handle a lot of the sort of signaling problems that exist today, where it's like, there's actually no agreed upon way to signal that a video stream is 360. Believe it or not, there is no recognized flag. And a lot of or much less whether it's 360 3D, whether it's 3D 180, or so on and so forth. I mean, most of the tools today, they just use extensions on the file name to indicate the format, right? That's where we are.
Right.
So OMAF will solve that problem, but the question of codecs actually designed for spherical content, there are none. And AV1 wasn't designed for it, and HEVC wasn't designed for it. It's an open question whether the next generation after that would be designed for it. But you have to wonder, whether we'll even be using spherical video as our format for immersion, how long that's going to exist. So, I mean, if I had to lay odds, I would say that the existing planar codecs are good enough for spherical video content, and will leap over sort of like a custom designed spherical a video encoder to some sort of encoding that is more aware of space, some sort of 3D
And
or
it-
point cloud or something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
it's interesting that you're talking about this because, again, this was way back in the history of streaming. We had MPEG 7, which was essentially
Yeah.
designing what the wrapper format looks like. We had MPEG 21 that was doing the same thing. So what they're doing is revisiting it specifically for how you look to hand off videos from one field of view to the other. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, the OMAF standard is largely about defining how spherical content is represented.
Okay, regardless of the codec.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And it also does wrap in MPEG-H for audio.
Sure.
So it includes spatial audio and multi-channel audio as
Okay.
sort of part of that package.
Right.
So that's the goal of that. And that's going to be published, I think, before the end of this year. And so it's, 2018 will be about that format getting out into the world. Now, whether it wins wide acceptance, I can't say.
Okay, interesting. Anybody else want to add on that? So we talked a little bit about bottlenecks. Are the bottlenecks primarily on the consumption side with the resolution of the devices and the form factor of the devices, or are they on the production side? And you alluded to, you think that there are production issues. What about on the client side for the viewer? What are the limitations that people run into there? Or the feedback that you get from your clients who say, we're not getting the uptake we need in it because consumers are complaining about this.
So I would say some of the bottlenecks obviously is bandwidth is always an issue, specifically in how they're going to be consuming. Because obviously a lot of the VR content is viewed on mobile phones, and generally a lot of times, even though 4G LTE is the standard method for most phones to receive data, I would say that sometimes that's an issue. So that's something that is a major bottleneck, because again, even in this day and age, bandwidth is an issue, because again, even at this location, we were having troubles accessing the internet. So I say, and I see most of the viewers are on mobile phones, but basically for the desktop computers, they're usually a lot more, they have better bandwidth. It's a lot more accessible because, again, it's either at an office or at a home, and that generally, there is not that much of an issue from what I can tell generally. So, I mean, that's my take on things.
Okay, so bandwidth primarily is the limitation?
Yes.
What about consumer devices? Do people express sort of discomfort with the current technologies that we have? Or do your clients just say, we're going to go do this, and the number of people we get is the number of people we get that come view it?
I mean, the display technology, Devon was briefly talking about it too, which is pixel per degree. So
Okay.
currently, we are limited by the pixel per degree from some of these devices, but they're all getting better. Like the new Google Pixel, that's got a much better density of pixel per degree. I'm not sure if any of you guys have put HMDs on, but you get the screen door effect. It feels like you're looking through a screen door, and that's because if we take a magnifier and we walk right up to a 65-inch LCD top-of-line 4K monitor, you're going to see the pixels. For us to have that completely invisible, we need higher counts, somewhere in the range of 25 and up, for it to be completely invisible to the eye. Human vision is about 75. Motion picture film scan is about 50. So we still have a long way to go. The best device is now about 15, right around 15 current technology.
And what does that translate into in terms of like PPI? Because obviously, as you say, you're bringing a device very close to your eye. So we know PPI for a standard phone held at arm's length. We know that. What's the relative difference?
The challenge there is that the optics distort the planar screen. So PPI is not a very good measure for these. So PPD, pixels per degree, is the better
Is the
measure.
more- okay.
I guess I could probably do the math, but I can't do it in my head to figure out like how it translates. At least you could do sort of for the center of the lens, but I'd have to figure it out here.
It'll take too long.
But I think what you were alluding to with the challenges on the user side, there are a lot of challenges on the user side, and the hardware is all really fiddly. It's mostly pretty uncomfortable. Every one of the just setting up an Oculus Rift, that you got to allot an hour to that. It's getting better. There's more. You can buy computers now that are ready to go, but it's expensive, and the resolution is not as high as it can be or it should be, but also there's it's heavy, it's sweaty, it's like there's a lot of just sheer usability problems for headsets.
Which begs an interesting question. I know we want to do this as a personal experience for people, but think about Fahrenheit 451 with the rooms that have the four-sided screens. Are we also looking at immersive environments that you go into a room probably not this big, probably a quarter this size, and therefore it also takes care of some of the PPD issues as well because you're further away from the screen.
We're actually doing rooms way bigger than this.
Okay.
Hundreds of thousands of square feet of projection, not live, but pre-processing.
But can people get the perspective with the rooms being that big? Because I think one of the benefits of having it here or even having it in a small room is you turn around and you take it all in.
It's a totally different language. It's like Disney Circle Vision, and then you have this personal connection. So again, the language really changes, and that's something we want to work with the content creators.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing I have to add in, again, a couple things actually, is that some of the pain points for users is that, again, the tether with the head-mounted displays or headsets. Eventually, those issues are being resolved because, again, there's going to be tetherless systems. But also another thing is that you guys had mentioned resolution, and resolution is getting better. There's a small company called Pimax who just released an 8K headset, and I believe the resolution is 3840 by 2160 in each eye. And also they were able to eliminate the screen door effect. And so we are getting those resolutions, and that was from a small company. Just think on what a larger company such as Facebook or Google is going to be producing in the next generation. So that will solve that issue. But also another thing is that, again, you had mentioned room scale, but I see the future specifically for having a much more, I guess, wider experience would be, again, with volumetric video and also what Microsoft is terming as holographic capture, so bringing in captured performances or humans, scanned humans, and for real-time performances, and being able to insert them into a 3D engine such as Unity, and where, again, you can change the different resolutions on the fly. Yes, it'll scale.
But we're a long way from that technology being usable in live production.
Hopefully not. Because it's awesome.
It's coming. Yeah.
But again, a little bit back to what Devon said. Devon brought up some points about the user's experience that are just challenging. When before Nokia, we didn't have purpose-built cameras. We would take GoPros and strap them together, and it was a huge pain in the butt. When you have a complete focus dedication by manufacturers that are looking at this as a business model, they are going to put enough resources to improve on it. So what we're seeing now is that there's a lot of hardware manufacturers. There's tons of them. If you guys heard the new announcement with Microsoft and their new headsets, a lot of manufacturers are making from Canon all the way down to Dell. There's about 100 manufacturers that are making $300 headsets. They're all improving the quality. So once we get purpose-built, dedicated headsets, this will be another breakthrough that we'll have, just as we've had in the capture.
Well,
we had
it'll
these breakthroughs.
at least provide an inflection point of standardization across the board to find out whether consumers are willing to live with the devices.
But back to you again, the viewerships, it's not just headsets. It's handsets, headsets, domes, Apple TV, Amazon Fire. We watch things on Apple TV all the time at our place.
Okay.
In 360, we just scroll around.
You just use the
absolutely.
remote to scroll through.
And it's that easy. There are bottlenecks, but those are meant to be broken. There are breakthroughs that are happening all the time, just as they happen in the capture technology.
So essentially what I hear you saying with the Apple TV is you're using something that's not purpose-built to look at 360, but you're making do with it because you get the trade-off of not having to have it right on your face.
And we talk about headsets a lot, but the vast majority of viewership of 360 content is, in handheld devices with, Magic Window.
Right.
And that's, that I have to admit, that took us, it was a surprise to us when we we made Ozo, we were really aiming at the headset experience. And then when we saw how quickly and broadly 360 video became, commonly consumed in the handheld devices, we had to sort of change our thinking about what a 360 production was, what the audience is, how do you
And it's
interact with
fascinating,
that
it took us
audience.
20 years to go from iPics still images to 360 video.
Yeah.
So let's talk about VR video versus 360 video. Most of the time people use those sort of interchangeably, but VR video doesn't have to be in a 360 format. Do you all agree it's essentially anything where you're merging, say, 3D with live action? Or how do you all define VR video, ignoring the 360 portion of it?
Those are a bunch of different words, all of which have various meanings to various people, right? It's quite a confused
And to the
landscape,
point
right?
about the
Yeah.
language, if we don't
Yeah,
have a language
it's
to
true.
discuss it in,
It's true. My take on it is that, VR and AR are sort of consumption modalities. They're at the end of the pipeline. And you can consume a variety of different content using a VR or an AR headset. And content that's created for one use case is often usable in another use case as well. 360 video is a kind of content that can be consumed in a VR headset. It can be consumed on a device. It can be consumed in an AR headset. Actually, Microsoft's HoloLens has an app called HoloTour on it, which was created at great expense, which is really one of the best 360 video experiences I've ever seen. But you can only get it on HoloLens, and they put a couple of objects close to you that are Unity style, 3D boxes to make you feel like it's
Right,
3D,
again,
right? But
shock
really
value or
but really
perception value,
it's just a 360 video, and it's
Okay.
really well done. So it's confusing, and it's confusing to everybody because people use the words very differently. But I think one thing that's useful, I think, is to recognize that VR and AR are consumption modalities. That's all they are.
okay. Anything else to add, either of the two of you?
Yeah, I would say there's somewhat, again, reiterating what you said, but again, there's different layers or different levels of and the key term is immersion, as they would say, because VR is much more immersive because most of the time it's going to be, you'll be engaging in a virtual world, so to speak, and then AR is going to be mixing reality with virtual objects and humans and so forth. So again, and we're at that point where all that's being worked out, and
So is it
those
Second
terms.
Life come to life again? Is that what it is?
That's a possibility on the VR side,
Right,
but so yeah, but going back to 360 video, there's a lot of debate whether or not if that's true VR, and so I would say it's just using the equipment to view VR as well.
Yeah, and I don't think
Yeah.
anybody would argue that it's not immersive, but is it virtual? Is probably that's
Yeah,
probably where
would
the
it be
hang-up
virtual, I
comes.
would say.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I'm going to open it up real quick for questions from the audience, and we have our Vanna White in the back, and then we'll show your video right down toward the end.
I'm kind of a novice at this show. I know a lot more today than I did 2 days ago. But I keep getting this idea that this disruptive technology, there's nothing, as you said, the fellow there in the white shirt said that there's a lot of, it's hard, a lot of challenges, put it that way. And it's a negative side to it, obviously. But is that also a positive side, too?
That
To it,
because of the,
that a year from now, the challenges will be different, but will have advanced?
That's what makes this such a great place to be. It's so much fun. There's 20 years of problems to solve. I mean, there's nothing I'd rather be doing than working on something that's that big, and it's just, and you can see the future. The potential is so obvious, but it's going to take a lot of work by a lot of people all around the world to realize it. And being part of that work is just so much fun.
and also looking at standards, as you say, because making sure that with all that effort going in, they're not going in at cross purposes. Good question.
Or sometimes breaking standards.
Oh, okay, sure.
I mean-
There we go. Yeah. For a specific reason.
Just getting it done however you can. I mean, there's a lot of that going on right now.
I'd like to say there is a positive side to this because of the fact that, again, once we get past all the technologies and the barriers and so forth, it's going to allow us to connect with other humans on a more, I guess, empathetic basis. Because, again, there's a lot of content that's being developed where you actually get to feel what it's like to be in, like, a prison, for example. And you don't get to, you can't illustrate that with video, but only through these virtual experiences that you're able to actually be in the shoes of the person going through that experience. So the positive aspect of it, yes, it'll help us connect as humans much more in the future, I would say.
And
Yeah,
just the-
and
go
also
ahead.
let me add, yeah, there's a lot of advertisers that are figuring out how they can reach their audience in a totally different way. We've been using the same methods for hundreds of years. We're broadcasting. We're taking seeds and we're just throwing it out there. So that's one method, and it's not successful in this new world where as soon as you guys woke up till you go to bed, you're bombarded by content. You see content as you're driving billboards, newspaper, radio, and your mobile phones. How do you get an active viewer? How do you get them to actually view your content and not fast forward it and share it and watch it repeatedly? So studies have been made with virtual reality that a lot of people rewatch these. It's not watched one time because there's, just like in life, we have what's called happenstance. I'm here, I get to discover things that I normally wouldn't. And the same thing could happen in virtual reality. So there are things that could be rediscovered when you view it again and again.
And is the watching it over again to get more of the nuance, or is it that you didn't get it the first time?
In nuances. And a lot of smart advertisers, forward-thinking advertisers, are starting to leverage this. They're realizing it's not about viewerships. Notice early on I said we had 5.8 million. That doesn't matter anymore. It's about how you engage, how deep you engage, and advertisers will pay a lot of money. Look at Red Bull. Look how successful they are at advertising directly to their audience that is their core audience, and having them become their advertisers, basically.
Well, and especially if it drives action, that's where the advertiser will pay. Mark, I had a question about something you said when you're talking about the perspective of being in a prison, and I'm going to use an analogy in video gaming. For a number of years, when you did FPSs, it was all single player, in a, I don't know, Castle Wolfenstein or something like that.
Or Doom, yeah.
Then we went to the MMORPG model where it's you and a team of people, and Call of Duty World War II came out yesterday or today. And obviously you're having people who are doing fragging parties, to use that kind of term. What you're sort of describing is first-person perspective storytelling. Is
Yes.
there a point at which we move to where it's group storytelling so that each person who's viewing this virtual reality world gets a slightly different perspective depending on where they're standing, or will we always sort of have it that it's essentially stereoscopic with the ability to look around and it becomes only first-person storytelling?
Well, no, it will. It'll expand to, again, another buzzword is social VR. I mean, that's where things are going to be really interesting, and where, again, you'll be living as an avatar in a computer-generated world specifically, and everyone will get to define their story or experience what they want to. So I see that's going to be a great potential for that. But also, with VR and the way there's limitations now, specifically on with 360 video, is that again you have to right now be you're tethered to one single point where you're just looking around, but it's going to expand beyond that, and when you're able to do so, and look at things through multi-points or various viewpoints, I think that's going to expand the storytelling experience overall.
So we're in storytelling before the Steadicam. If we're talking about
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
So regarding storytelling, more specifically in journalism with 360 video, one of the comparisons that's made is that you can also see the camera crew and everything in a 360 video.
You see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, there's discussion about how you best handle that as a news organization. Would the limited field of view that was described change that? Could that be an opportunity just to see, 180 degrees or something?
Right,
Is that-
hemispherical as opposed to...
And then just another part of the question regarding virtual reality. I've read about empathy as being one of the things that's inspired by virtual reality storytelling and journalism, and could the panel comment on that?
So hemispherical and empathy.
I'll start with empathy. I don't think there's any technology in the world that can give you empathy. That comes from the heart. That comes from a piece of paper and a pen and a great storyteller that can really affect human spirit. So there is no tech that can do that. Only thing that this tech does is it gives filmmakers and creatives and free thinkers ability to magnify and amplify their content. As far as 180 versus 360, for me personally, I feel 360 video virtual reality, it's not just about the conscious but the subconscious. It's also the unspoken words, it's the subtext. And that is something that you feel, it's not something that you see. And if I disconnected my viewers and just give them a blind spot here, not everyone's going to look 360, but they're going to want to feel like they're there. And most studies happen where people get into the 360 and then they look straight ahead. So I think it's really important to give the viewers the true sense of being there and give them compelling stories so they don't have to look around. They can just follow what's happening. And then finally, your first question, which was for news organizations that you see what's happening with the news crew. So part of me thinks that there's two stories, but what's in front of the camera, which is really interesting. And then there's also what's behind the camera, which is true. It's real. I personally prefer what's behind the camera. I'm a cameraman myself, so that's it for me.
Yeah, and I would say certainly technically, it's very feasible to do the 180 format, and Google is going to be pushing this. It's in some ways easier to do a high quality 2D feed, or it will be very shortly, than it is to do a 360 feed. But I would say for journalism particularly, it ought to be 360. I think, as consumers of journalism these days, we have learned hard lessons about the fact that we can't trust the media as an arbiter all the time, or at least
fake news
we need to understand, their context, right? And so I actually think that television news lies to you in many ways, and a 360 capture could also lie to you, but it's harder because you're seeing more. You're seeing, you're seeing that the crowd isn't as big as they're showing you, or it's bigger than they're showing you, right? Or, I think that gives more tools to the audience to really understand the truth of what's happening in that space.
And make discernment. I mean, it sort of reminds you of Wag the Dog.
Yeah.
If you saw that 360 was actually on a soundstage, then of course your discernment goes way up.
Right. And of course, then we would know the moon landing was fake, right?
Exactly. I was going to go there, but I figured you could.
One thing that I do want to say is, Michael, I want to disagree with you about not being able to simulate empathy through technology. With what's coming out through the horizon, again, there's the name escapes me at the moment, but there's a virtual reality experience about someone in solitary confinement, and being in the same prison cell as that person, where you get to feel that confinement yourself, and where you get to interact or to speak to the other person that's in that cell, and he gets to share that experience with you. You're able to feel what he feels. And again, the technology will bring us to the point where we will be able to feel what other people feel, and I truly believe that.
I'm just going to say Shawshank Redemption to that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
That was empathy right there. I didn't have to see it in 360. So it is both. You need amazing tech, which was film. They captured that essence. It could have been written as well.
Yeah.
But Shawshank Redemption gave me that as well.
Schindler's List did that for me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, but one of the questions there, I guess, is: are we giving empathy, or are we giving sort of extreme sympathy? Because clearly, if you're in a solitary confinement situation and you can talk to somebody, you're not in solitary confinement.
Yeah. No, but you can be put in that situation where you're in solitude, but also, again, that experience allows you to interact with the person, or even, see that person.
And is it such that that when somebody goes into an immersive environment like that, they actually believe that they're there? Because that's where the empathy would come.
Yes, you can achieve that. Again, the tech, as I said, it's getting close. We're not fully there yet, but we're able to replicate most of it. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
One more thing for news organizations. A lot of things that we've been experimenting with is inside the 360 field of view, we actually bring all your live 2D elements inside of it. So for example, I get to see the surroundings of the solar eclipse, and I can see exactly what's happening all around me, but I also want to see the moon and the sun at the same time. I also want to see the telemetrics of where I am right now in relation to where the sun is. So all of this could be embedded inside of a much bigger field of view than just a 16 by 9. So a lot of news organizations are utilizing all these things together. Actually, we're also bringing social media inside of it as well, and for all live.
So you're saying that some of that stuff could be occurring behind you if you want to look at the backstory.
This could be a virtual monitor that's here that has the live 2D production that camera's capturing, and it could be here inside the 360. And we're going to have the show special here. We're going to have all the heart rate of the race car driver. All those could be embedded in there. And the viewers outside could also be interacting in this. So what advertisers are looking for is interaction. They're looking for how do we engage, how do we keep them as long as possible. This method could definitely be a new breakthrough for you as well.
Interesting. Time for one final question. Right up here.
Hi. So my question is about live streaming. Let's say we have some companies who do broadcasting a live video game.
Sorry, can
Yeah,
you
you can
start
speak
over again? They're putting the microphone up.
Just a little louder.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is about live streaming, like live game when we stream in VR. So how much you think, how many degrees a broadcaster can broadcast and a person can enjoy as a you know, like a, he can, if he can broadcast 360 degree, but maybe a person cannot enjoy 360 degree for a live game. So how much you think, you know, is the optimum limit in terms of bandwidth of broadcasting and for a viewer?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, we've seen some 180 sports experiences for live VR. I think 180s, I have a very strong opinion on this. I think the only benefit of 180 is that it's easier to do.
Now with the technology.
And very rapidly, you know, the combination of better production tools with the Viewport adaptive streaming so that you don't send the whole sphere, you only send what the user's looking at, makes, you know, 360 as easy to execute as 180. And when that's the case, why would you do anything else? I mean, I was on the pitch at the Champions League final last year, you know, standing, you know, on the sideline in front of the Bayern Munich crowd, right? And that was a terrifying experience. I don't know if you know this crowd, but they literally have a fence, a 10-foot tall fence, you know, at the edge of the pitch, and the people are climbing up on the fence and shouting things in German that I didn't understand, but I knew were pretty mean, right? And to have that, and we didn't have the ability to send spatial audio at that time. We do now, but in the truck we could hear it in full spatial audio. Wow. So you're standing there next to the goal watching the match, but behind you is the crowd and the noise, and it was amazing, you know. And I don't want 180. I want that full experience, you know. And I think it's going to get easier and easier to do.
And it's interesting you say that the audio would have been what would have driven people to turn around and
It was
look.
the audio.
Yeah.
That was the most amazing. And then I spent much of my time just looking at the crowd because they were nuts.
Yeah, the zombie apocalypse. All right, I'd like everyone to help me thank our panelists for being here today.